Today's hot seat is Orly Zeewy. Orly is an author, speaker, and facilitator of lightbulb moments. Her superpower, she makes fuzzy clear, and we're gonna talk about quite a bit of fuzziness in this episode with Orly. She turns generic messaging into clear marketing messages that help startups and early stage companies cut through the noise to attract their ideal customers and scale fast. She has written this incredible book. I would like to flash it on the screen here. Ready Launch Brand, the Lean Marketing Guide for Startups. It is available on Amazon and many other popular bookstores, so you can definitely find it. So this is the book. I'll flash it later on again. Um, so Orly, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sabir. It's a pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Definitely. So startups are at my heart. I love startups. I've worked with startups. I've actually helped a lot of startups actually get started, or I'm actually even right now working with startups, trying to get them to the launch pad.
Yeah.
So I'm part of that founding team members, right, including my own brands and other brands. What I would like you to tell us more about yourself to so that people get to know you, the audience gets to know you about your background and why startups.
So yeah, that's an excellent question. So, I come from a long line of entrepreneurs. My father was an entrepreneur, his father before him, grandfather. I mean, it goes back generations. And I never really thought about it until I think it was around 2001 when I was starting my consulting practice. And all of a sudden I realized, I've never really enjoyed working for other people. I really like doing my own thing because I like the variety. I like, I just like, there's something about the unpredictability, which for some people would be awful, right? Like if you're somebody who really needs every day to be exactly the same, this is not the life for you.
Hmm.
But there's something else about it. So my father actually struggled quite a bit in his startup journey, and honestly, it made me realize like the impact that the founder, their success and their failure really gets represented in the family, right? It impacts the family. So at some point along the line, I realized like I really wanted to do something about that. But I also, I have an international background. I grew up in 4 countries and 3 continents. I'm multilingual, and part of
Wow.
that experience of speaking different languages, of not always knowing what people were saying, but you could always understand what they meant. And
Hmm.
I feel like that kind of training is just perfect for somebody who does the kind of work that I do, which is really helping startup get clear on who they are, who needs it, why it matters, how to communicate it clearly. And so that's kind of in a nutshell. I mean, I'm condensing quite a few years here, but yeah, it's just I've always been fascinated by this idea of starting a company, keeping the company going. How do we get people to come, right? How do we attract those early adopters? What do we need to say so people hear us? And then this whole idea of cutting through the noise, which is really my whole brand is focused on that. And how do you cut through the noise and get heard, so people can actually see you?
Were the international experience in your childhood, or was it
Yes.
more? It was in your
Childhood.
childhood.
Yeah. So I was not born in the United States. I'm actually an immigrant. My kids are the firstborn in my
Oh, me
family on
too.
both sides. Right. So, yeah. Right. Where were you born, Sabir?
I was born Turkish, so I'm Turkish.
Turkish.
But I think I left out when I was 3, so it was
Yeah.
a
So
long
you're
time
really
ago.
American. So
I've
you're
been I've been
American.
in New York all my life.
Yeah.
It's to the point that my cousins tell me, don't say Turkish, just say New Yorker, American. Just stick with that. Don't even mention Turkey.
Well, see, for me, it was a little bit more complicated because so my parents are Romanian. I do not speak Romanian. I grew up listening to it, so I knew a few words. I think I know how to say goodbye, thank you, good night, those kinds of words. But but
To
I never
talk to your
considered
grandparents.
what's that?
To talk to your grandparents, basically.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But so I was actually born in Israel, but I grew up in Paris and in Lausanne, Switzerland. And those were all my formative years. And by the time we immigrated to the United States when I was 11, I did not speak a word of English, but I spoke all these other languages. And because what I realized is when you speak many languages and you still have that capacity, because you lose that at age 7. So as long as you're still learning languages past that point, those receptors stay open for the rest of your life. I've done quite a bit of reading in this for my own children because I spoke French to them when they were little. And so when we came to the United States, I learned English pretty quickly. And now, people assume I'm American, but of course I have a very unusual name, and I unpacked my whole origin story in my book. I have a whole chapter on brand identity because, when you spend your whole life trying to figure out who you are, I mean, seriously, Romanian parents, I was born in Israel, I grew up speaking French, and now I live in the United States. I don't know who I am. So I spent my whole life really trying to figure that out, and so that's why I'm so good at helping other people, because it took me years to even be able to tell this origin story, because usually I would just say, yeah, I speak French, because people assumed Orly Zeewy, they didn't quite know what it was. So, it was just easy. And then I realized, like, why am I bearing my identity to make it easier for other people? And so I stopped doing that.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right?
Earlier in my career, some people tried to change my first name.
To what?
Not me, some other people, because it may
Really?
have been convenient for them.
Right.
So, I mean, I said, I came up with other names for them. I said, it's convenient for me to call you those names. Would you like that? No, that's not my name. Well, that's not my name either. This is my name. This is who I am,
Exactly.
and there was it kind of reminded me of Muhammad Ali. I don't know who his opponent was. He kept on calling him with his prior name. He goes like, and then in the ring, he just got his I guess his revenge back, I guess, right? Kept on hitting him and said, "What's my name? What's my name?" And kept on hitting him until the guy yelled out his proper name, his new name, not his prior name. Just kind of shifting gears. I mean, I've had on the show, the reason I was asking about the international is because I've had amazing guests before you that talked about Asian entrepreneurship, for example, very recently in a recent episode. I've had phenomenal guests that talk about a UK entrepreneurship, where you think that because they speak English and they're very similar to Americans, the thing is the culture of entrepreneurship is not as rich as it is in United States, for example, right? Basic facilities like business loans and SCORE and small business administration, things of that nature that you take for granted in United States don't exist, so that's why I was asking you, like, if you grew up much later in your career, for example, you would have experienced the differences in not only cultures because of language and behavior and food and stuff like that, but it's also businesses conducted in a very different way in different countries and different cultures.
Well, as a woman entrepreneur, I always felt that being in the United States was easier than being in other countries, where I think it is harder, or at least it used to be, certainly in Switzerland, which is, people don't know this about Switzerland. Most people don't know this, that women didn't get the vote in Switzerland until 1973, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Very paternalistic. So, as a woman and as a businesswoman, I've always felt that the United States was a friendlier environment for women businesses. And you see a lot of women starting their own businesses here. I don't know. I haven't looked at, I haven't compared it to other countries, but I know here, it's not easy. I mean, starting a business is not easy. So I don't want to make it sound like it's easy here, but there's less of a stigma about that here.
And the facilities are available. Certain facilities are available that make it at least bearable, not necessarily impossible. In some places, unless you're a citizen of a specific country, you can't even establish a business. I had a gentleman from the Middle East, and he had actually built companies in various different countries in the Middle East: Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, I believe, and Dubai, and so many, and Lebanon. And there are those kind of citizenship restrictions that actually restrict you unless you're in trade-free zones and stuff like that. I want to come back to what you said about long line of entrepreneurs in your family, but I know I've had guests that they came from long line of lawyers, and one of my guests, and she actually expresses it in on my show. It was all lawyers in her family, so for her it was very natural to become a lawyer, right? But then
Right.
she became a lawyer, decided that that was not for her, and she actually excellent personal branding, a marketer, and a specialist. You
Mhm.
know, she's very good at that.
Right.
In your case, you had a long line of entrepreneurs, but that's not how your story went, right? You immediately you were not an entrepreneur coming out of school or even into the real world.
Well, there was, there's always been this bias, and I don't know. I think it's shifted, and certainly since the pandemic, it's shifted quite a bit. This idea that you're not really serious unless you're working full time, and somehow that's the path to financial independence, and that somehow being an entrepreneur, founding your own thing, that's a bit of a pipe dream, and that's not secure, and that certainly was borne out with my father's experience. But I left out my mother's side, and so on my father's side it was entrepreneurs. On my mother's side, it was all educators, like generations of educators.
Wow.
And so I am both an educator and an entrepreneur. And I've been a lifelong educator, and I still teach. I'm an adjunct professor here at Jefferson University, and I still teach 1 or 2 classes a year just to kind of keep my hand in it. But I also taught in the Closed School of Entrepreneurship at Drexel. So I've worked with student entrepreneurs, and somehow those two things have kind of blurred over the years, where this idea of helping students launch a business or learn how to think like an entrepreneur has also spilled over in kind of how I run my own business.
How do you find it different? Like, because I'm also a professor at a local university. I do it part time. Um, educating students versus coaching your clients.
Well, I have to tell you, it's kind of similar in some ways, because, well, first of all, one of the reasons why I love teaching is because I learn as much as my students do, right? And every time I teach a class, I actually get to fine tune what I do with my consulting clients. So some of the exercises that I developed for my early classes, I've actually used in my coaching work. And then, it's almost like having a focus group, because students are not shy about telling you when something doesn't work. So, I feel like there is a little bit of an overlap. There's another piece which I find really interesting, which is that teaching, it's a very specific way that you learn, right? And the best teachers do not just throw a bunch of information at you. They're not a talking head standing in front of a podium. I know there are classes like that, and for a certain subject that might make sense, but for the kind of thing that I do, it's really much more collaborative. And it's also having an understanding of how people learn. And that has been very useful for me in my career, because I understood early on that, if you want someone to change the way they do something, you have to give them the building blocks to do it, right? And it's got to be done in a very process-oriented way, and you have to go at their pace, because otherwise, there's the issue becomes that you overwhelm someone, and when they shut down, they're not going to learn anything. So what I look for are really those aha moments, which is why I call myself a facilitator of light bulb moments.
For both education and mentoring your clients.
Yes. And I've had people say that to me. Oh my gosh, and I see it, as an educator, this is kind of what we live for, is to see that light bulb going off for a student. And for clients, I would say that probably the best compliment I've ever been given is, I know that these are your words, but it feels like mine. They feel like my words. And that's, when you've achieved that, when you've been able to integrate someone's thinking, someone's voice, but give it back to them in a way that they can use it to help their business. For me, that's a real success.
So, doing consulting, and you're learning these things and you're educating, then you decide to write this book, the one that I flashed in the beginning.
Right.
That's your Ready Launch brand, right?
Ready Launch brand. Yes. Yes, I in my spare time, and I also raised 2 children. Yes, I had a lot of free time. No, I just, I think it started out, I was writing about it. I've been a guest blogger for many years. I wrote for the Marketing Journal. I have a column now in another publication. And it just was kind of a natural kind of outpouring of that. But I went back to school and got an MBA in 2015. And that's when the idea for the book started. And at first, it was really going to be more about my experience. And what I realized is, I'm a data geek, and I like getting data. And it's much stronger if you get other people to tell you their stories, and then you add your own kind of thinking and your own kind of twist to it, your own take on it. So I interviewed 25 entrepreneurs about their marketing journey. And over again, they kept validating what I'd been saying for 25 years, so that was really a great aha moment for me to realize that, in fact, what I felt was anecdotal was actually pretty much a universal, at least in these 25 examples. And the kinds of things they were saying is basically do what I just said, So that was really, it was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed the interviews. It was really fun to learn about all these different types of businesses.
I mean, having been doing this show, I think you're episode 71, I believe, right? So 71 episodes so far, and I come across incredible guests, and interviewing them, I learned so much about each one of those, and these are 70 plus different topics that were covered. And I can imagine the value that you get out of the 25, for the book that you did, for the interviews that you did. Kind of shifting gears a little bit, right? I love watching home improvement type shows, right?
Me too. Oh my God, I'm totally addicted. Totally addicted. Like
I'm gonna connect it to why I'm bringing that up. Whenever I walk into any business, right? And I would like to use examples from your book so that I would like you to use them. Whenever I walk into any business, to me, I come across 2 types of businesses that I, at least in my head, this is what I see. One is a hoarding show. You walk in, you cannot even walk, you cannot find your footsteps, right? Because they're hoarding, whether it's too many products in their pipeline, they don't really have the right messaging, all of that stuff. I mean, that they're just hoarding a lot of things. They think that they have a lot of assets, like intellectual property. They don't, That's one type that I come across. And the other type, it requires decluttering. So they have the right things. That's why I'm using the analogy of a
I'm
home.
totally with you. No, I love this analogy. Go ahead.
When I walk in, I see that, oh, you know what? These are really, this house has very good rooms. It's just there's a ton of clutter that needs to be cleared out of the attic and the basement, and the garage needs to be cleaned out. And maybe if I get a garbage disposal, I can get rid of some of these things, maybe do a new paint job. And that's how I'm evaluating these businesses.
Yeah.
So those are the 2 classes that I put most businesses into, the ones that I come across. Not necessarily they are all startups. I mean, they're a mix of them. I have gigantic companies that are publicly traded that fall into that, as well as I have startups that want to sell. They want to make something that works for everybody, and that's not the answer either. So
I have a whole thing about that.
So in your bio, I said her superpower is making fuzzy clear. And going back to that statement of fuzzy being clear, it's decluttering and it's removing all that hoarded stuff that you have all over the floor, right? So let's use examples from your experience. Let's go through some of those.
So first of all, I want to add to, because I love this, what you just said, and it totally makes sense. I'm completely with you on this. There's another piece to it, which I've seen, which is the fear of leaving something out. And so some of that you have to kind of get over the fact that too much, it's, the less is more. I forget which architect said that. Was it I.M. Pei? It was one of those architects who said less is more. Anyway, what happens is you're so stymied by making the wrong move and leaving something out. That's part of why you have all that clutter, why you have all that stuff, because you're not sure which is the right thing. And so in my process, what I really do is I help you identify the one thing that is really what you want to be doing. Because the truth is, we don't want to be working with everybody. I mean, I remember hearing this from my students. Well, everybody needs this. I said, well, that may be so, but how much money do you have to market to all these different, all these different types of customers, all these different target markets? And the answer is usually, I don't have any money. So therefore, as a startup, it also makes financial sense to get clear on one place, right? One way to go. And so I'm kind of reminded of a client I had many years ago. Was a summer day camp, and they had been messaging on the wrong message for literally decades, and they were losing market share. And this is a summer day camp, so here they were in July, and they still had spots. This was not good, and they were up against a growing competition, and they couldn't understand why. Right? They didn't know how to compete. And anyway, long story short, well, the first step is usually you want to do some kind of market research. So we conducted an online survey, and 100 families responded. So they had a lot of loyalty, and a lot of people love this place. And one of the questions, I asked them two questions that got really interesting answers. One was, what's the number one reason you send your kids there? Because they had multiple generations of families. So you had people who had met their spouse there, then their children went there, right? So they had that whole kind of longevity. And when we asked that question, what's the number one reason? And back up a minute here. So they had been messaging on the lake. That was their kind of their claim to fame, was this huge lake. It was, I don't even know, 150 acres or something. It's huge, huge lake. And so you can understand why that's what they would focus on. But when I asked that question, out of 100 people, I think one or two, I think at most two people said the lake. That was just not what they cared about. So instead, when I asked, well, when I looked at their answers, the things that they cared about was that their kids had fun and they grew into better people. And that was something that they had never thought about, right? And the other thing, which was really interesting, is I asked them what they thought about the logo. Now, remember, they'd had the same logo for 3 decades. And the answer was, what logo?
They didn't even realize.
They didn't even see it. Why? Because it was built on the wrong premise. And if you don't care about the lake, when you kind of ignore it, and this is part of that whole cutting through the noise and making sure that, you're turning fuzzy clear, right? The clarity was, nobody cares about this. And so what happened was, we were, and actually this was the swim coach, the director of the swim program. They had amazing swim program. People came to this camp for that. And she said, well, I know this is the place where small kids do big things. And that's their new tagline.
Wow.
And once they did that and completely shifted, right? They shifted their thinking, they shifted the way, and so when they had open houses, right? This is what they talked about. They went from still having open spots in July to being booked by March.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, one of the things that I utilize when I'm evaluating businesses to see what's going on with them, right, for growth, is I follow 80-20 rule, right?
Good rule.
20% of what you're doing is going to be, if you're doing it meaningfully, it represents 80% of value for your business now and in future. And then the other 80% of things that you're doing, you're just keeping busy. There are many things that make you get busy with doing things, and you think that they're valuable. They're not. They're not. One biggest time waster is, why are you creating this new product? Oh,
yes.
No reason.
No reason.
They just create it. The number one industry that does that, and I've a lot of experience in it, is the vitamins and supplements industry.
Oh my God, yes.
Why did you create this new bottle? Oh, because our competition was coming up with. What if all of that competition is failure? You're failing with them, right?
Right. I know.
Like, why does that make sense for you? You said that you were going to be a CBD company. Why are you coming up with, I don't know, protein shakes? right?
Oh my God. And can I just say that is literally the crux of branding right there. Because if you are not clear on who you are, you build all this stuff that has nothing to do with kind of the DNA of your brand, your core value. And so what happens is, you follow the FOMO, right? The FOMO thing and the shiny new penny and, oh, so-and-so is doing, but no one ever asks the question, well, why are they doing that? And usually it's because someone else that they're following is doing it. So that's how we all end up being the same. And, I quote Seth Godin in my book. And one of the things he says is, in a crowded marketplace, fitting in is a failure. In a busy marketplace, not standing out is the same as being invisible.
Oh, that's brilliant.
I just love that quote. That's yeah. And it's absolutely true. It's like, we're so focused on, because we have this idea that we need to fit in somehow, but branding is the exact opposite, which is why it makes people uncomfortable. Because as human beings, right, we don't like, I think it's in Japan, the saying of, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down, I believe is the quote. I don't speak Japanese, so I don't know how it is in Japanese, but this idea that you want to blend in, but in branding, that's exactly the opposite of what you should be doing.
Exactly. Like,
yeah.
One key question, I mean, I don't pose it as a branding statement. I usually say, do your customers care about you? Like, if you didn't exist tomorrow,
Right.
will they actually miss you? Or do they go on Amazon and buy another vitamin bottle,
Exactly.
just because there wasn't anything special about it? Or in fact, the competition put this stuff up on additional 20% off or something, and boom, there goes the loyalty, and
Right.
they didn't care.
And that's why price is never a differentiator.
Never
do you know Steve Blank, I'm sorry, not Steve Blank, I'm sorry, David Acker, who wrote Building Strong Brands. Do you know that book?
No.
So what he talks about, and it's actually, I followed him for a while. He's now on YouTube, but he's like the grandfather of branding. He's been talking about this for a long time. But what he says is actually that cost goes directly to value. So if you're too low, if you're always, this is especially true in the B2B space, which is where that's where my focus is mostly in the B2B space. And what I have found is when your prices are too low, you can lose business. When it's too low, when it's too high, people start to ask, well, is it worth it? And so then that's where being clear on your value is so important. Because if you can back it up, honestly, and I do this, with the solopreneurs that I work with, it's like once they understand the value that they bring, it's a game changer, because now all of a sudden, instead of being concerned that they're too high, they're like, yeah, I can double, triple my, because look at the value that you're bringing. So you have to, it's a different kind of conversation. I think people get so hung up on, oh, how can I charge so much? And I say, it's not about charging too much. It's charging what it's worth to somebody. What is the transformation that you bring? It's like you have to ask different kinds of questions to get to that kind of answer.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, the end consumer, it could be a business, right? They're just looking at hourly rate. They're just going with a basic metric to kind of make reason in their head, because you did not tell them what the value was.
Exactly.
You missed it. You did not tell them that.
And that goes to building the right narrative. So, I always talk about this. So I think this is something else that David Acker talks about, is this idea that, in our brain, it's like we have these drawers where brands live. And once you get to the top, once you get to be like Nike, right? When you say sportswear, people think of Nike. Yes, they think of Adidas. They may think of others, but Nike's number one. They've spent millions of dollars making sure that they're that first. The thing is, once you're number one, it is almost impossible to knock them off. It's getting there that's really hard. But once you're there, right, then it's a whole different conversation.
And you become that word.
And you become the word. I mean, Nike is, right. And as we were talking about earlier, Nike is the reason that Nike is such a great name for a sportswear company that, that the top athletes wear, as they're standing on the podium at the Olympics, is because Nike is literally the name it's the Greek goddess of victory. I mean, what a great name for a brand that's being worn by the top athletes in the world. What people don't know, and this gets into naming, which I know we haven't really addressed yet, But do you know what the original name was?
No. I
Nobody
don't
ever
know that
does
history.
because it is so imitably forgettable. They had this name, by the way, for 10 years. It was called Blue Ribbon Sports. Exactly. Now,
One rule, Orly, one rule I have: the longer your name is, the smaller your company is.
that is so true. That is so actually
Orly Sabir and Associates and Daughters and Sons Incorporated.
LLC
That
or
means
yeah,
that
yeah.
means that you work full time, Orly, and I'm part time in that business. That's it. Those are 2 employees or 1.25 employees.
Exactly. But what's really important to kind of get out of this is that for 10 years, I think they never went above like 15 million, which now just seems like ridiculously low. And Scott Bedbury, who's the guy who rebranded Nike, they brought him in as a consultant, and he actually wrote this great book called something about a new brand world. And he also did Starbucks and I think Radio Shack. Anyway, what he talks about is this idea that, like they were so limited in their thinking, right? They were thinking like, well, we want to get to maybe like 50 million from 15. And he said to them, well, I can do that, but you're thinking too small. Like you can be much bigger. Because what he did, again, this is back to like, you have to shift your thinking before you can rebrand, because you start at this idea that it's just for top athletes. I mean, that's what Phil Knight did. He built a company around his friends who were, competitive runners. And they came up with their first shoe was the waffle shoe. I don't know how much you know about the history of Nike. It's actually pretty interesting. And that shoe was called Nike, by the way. And so what happened was once they shifted their thinking from, oh, it's only for top athletes, which that's a very limited market, to thinking that it's about helping people consider themselves athletes, even if you're just walking from your couch to the refrigerator, right? In your mind, right? There's something in your mind that says, I could do that. You watch the Olympics, like, oh, I could do that. Yeah, okay. But
it's like how many SUVs you see, like Jeeps and Honda Pilots and stuff. How many people actually go to like mountains and they climb these? How many?
right.
No one.
They
How
go to
many of
Whole
them actually
Foods.
go to the
They go to
nearest
Whole Foods. That's what
Stop and Shop and Whole Foods? Everybody.
Exactly. So it's just, it's just so funny. Like, what I love about that story, and like I said, anybody who would want to know more about it, that book, A New Brand World, it's an oldie but goodie, and it really kind of unpacks all of that. And what I would say, what I learned from reading that book and learning the story of Nike is the founders are so close to their story that they need an outsider to come in and say, wait a second, let's step back. What if it looked like this? What if instead of thinking that only competitive athletes wore your shoes, what if we thought more in terms of people who are trying to, get more active? And what if we built a whole line of clothing around that? What if they were, regular people, right? They don't all have to be. But in the process, they also created a brand that has become synonymous with Olympians and with athletes at the top of their game. So anyway, it's a really brilliant, kind of a brilliant marketing story.
Now, when it comes to platforms, right?
Yep.
The popular platforms for a B2C business, for example, would be something like Instagram and TikTok, right?
Right.
Would be very popular,
Yeah.
right? That's where you show your goods. The audience is there. You can buy that audience and bid on it and so on. And you show them your ad, they show up, right? For the B2B space, one platform that besides your own website where you're blogging and writing interesting content and stuff like that, that platform of choice tends to be LinkedIn, right?
Correct.
But I've seen LinkedIn not being used properly, right?
All
I'm
the
not
time.
talking. Everybody treats it, even though now it's what is it, about 25 years old now?
Something like that. There's 310 million monthly users on the platform.
25 years, everybody, still people.
Yeah.
I mean, I think LinkedIn suffers from branding, so I think they need to hire you to talk about that. That's one. That's a side note.
I agree.
That's a
LinkedIn,
side note.
if you're listening, I would be happy to talk to you.
That's one, right? But I think they're getting there though. But number two, I see very little number of B2B marketers actually utilizing the LinkedIn platform as a social platform to socialize their content, professional content, and use it for proper marketing and also messaging and stuff like that. What is involved in getting it right with LinkedIn as a platform, as a startup?
So I'm so glad you asked me that, because that's, I've developed a whole process around that, a LinkedIn rebrand package. And the reason I came up with that is because I kept seeing over and over again, it's like it's like you're trying to run from a place where you're already kind of got both hands tied behind your backs. And 80% of B2B business leads comes from LinkedIn. That's 80%, which is huge. Out of those 310 monthly users, 4 out of 5 are decision makers. Every Fortune 500 company is on LinkedIn. It's a huge opportunity that is often completely missed and mishandled, right? So, and the first step is you actually have to have a profile that people can find. So, you have this amazing opportunity, and most of these profiles are completely invisible. And that's because you have done none of the pieces that make for a strong profile. One is you need a banner that actually tells me something. It's not, most people know not to use the LinkedIn blue, the standard. Right.
But most of them do.
But I know, but I'm always amazed when I see it.
Not.
I'm like, really? And then you tell them, you can change it. Really? I didn't know I could change it. They think that that's like, it's like the car came with that and I can't change the fabric. No, you actually can't. Here's how you do it, But then there's, the next step is pick an image that actually tells me something, right? So for me, because, cutting through the noise is kind of that's my mantra. And, I talk a lot about the idea that, that all of us, it's as if we're standing in the middle of Times Square, because that is literally the perfect storm of advertising. I mean, it's just, literally, and it's like, this is where we are. We're all standing in the middle of Times Square trying to be heard. So I use that image, and it's, I've been using it now for quite a lot of years, and it's sort of become part of my branding. And so, and the idea is, cutting, it's a noisy world, stand out. Like, that's my goal. My goal is to help you stand out. I'm with Seth Godin on this, right? You need to stand out. You need to differentiate yourself. So that's number one. Number two is there's no title. It's just a bunch of words, but they don't really mean anything. And then people use hashtags like, okay, but I don't understand who you are and what you do. So in this culture, we read top to bottom. And so if I can't get past the banner and I don't understand your title, I'm gone and I never come back. That's why it's invisible, because you got 6 seconds. And I'm being generous.
No, let me correct you. You have 1.7 seconds.
I was thinking of a homepage. On the homepage, you have 6 seconds.
On a homepage, you have 6 seconds, maybe, right?
Maybe.
If that homepage is on a mobile device, it's 1.7 seconds.
Oh yeah.
Also.
Forget it. Yeah, I'm thinking desktop. Yeah, I know. This is like old school. I know. Do you know the average attention span of the average American adult is about 8 seconds, and in 2000 it was 12. And I don't know if this is an urban myth, but I just love the story. So if the average American adult's attention span is 8 seconds, a goldfish attention span is 9. Just saying. Even if it's not true, it's such a good story. I just had to throw it in there. But anyway, so the point is that you've already lost me, and I haven't even gotten to anything, right? Because again, I'm looking top to bottom. So there's nothing that stops me. There's nothing that stands out. When I changed my title to Facilitator of Lightbulb Moments, it was like people literally contacted me just because of the title. And I've gotten just incredible opportunities just because of the title. So, and what I tell my clients, the reason I know this works is because I've made all the same mistakes. I've made all the mistakes, more than once probably. But the other thing is that people forget is your about section is not a resume. And so the moment I open it,
don't copy and paste your resume into LinkedIn profile.
It's a nightmare. No one is going to read this, right? Like you just said, 1.7 seconds. I mean,
yep.
And by the way,
what that 1.7 seconds is? Your eyes paying attention to a photo and your finger doing this to ignore it.
Exactly. Yes.
That's it. 1.7 seconds. That's all it is.
Exactly. So you've already stacked the deck against you, right? And then you add on there a headshot that's like 30 years old or that's got like weird background. I've
Your
had
prom
people,
photo.
but yeah, like a prom photo, or you've got like your arm around somebody, but they're not in the
And then it's
picture.
cut off like this.
Yeah, I know. It's like a bad dating profile. You know, you're just kind of like this. Or there's like, I've seen ones where there's like kitchen cabinets that are behind you. It's like, for God's sakes, you know, just
Unless they are into home improvement and they want to show off the kitchen cabinets, it makes sense. But
well,
if you are
that's a different story.
if you are a chief marketing officer of a beverage company, why are you showing that kitchen cabinets in the background?
Exactly. And also, you know, some just rule of thumb, you want to be looking at the camera. You want to be smiling, unless you're not a smiler. And, you know, you want to look approachable. And, you know, like you want to be dressed like in a way that doesn't scream, I'm either, I don't know. You want to have less is more there too, especially for women, not having a whole lot of necklaces and collars and shapes. And, you know, I'm like, can we just crop out all this other stuff? We just want to see your face in your best higher self way, you know, and you don't need a professional. I mean, obviously, you know, I have a professional photographer because, you know, I kind of have to do that, but you don't necessarily have to hire professional photographers, but they're not, you know, you can find someone who's not that expensive either. But anyway, the point is, right there, you've already got 3 strikes against you, and they haven't even gone anywhere. I mean, forget getting to your experience. No one's even going to get there, right? So then when you get to the contact information, the about section, oh my God, you know, it's like chapter and verse. I mean, if I see more than 15 bullets, I'm just like, okay, we need to talk, because no one, and I mean no one, is reading this. So what is the purpose of it? The purpose of the about section, it has 3 purposes. One is, tell me a little bit about you. And remember, a little bit, like 1 or 2 sentences. That's it. Who am I? Who do I work with? What do they get? What's the transformation that I offer? Additional things like awards, education. I mean, you know, if you graduated from MIT, Harvard, and Stanford, you probably want to put that on there. If you graduated, you know, last in your class in some, you know, in a community college, not that there's anything wrong with community college. Let me just say that up front. But that's not a selling point. What's a selling point could be your experience. Have you been on boards? Have you been a volunteer? Do you work with, some foundation? I mean, there's so many ways that you could show up that shows who you are. So you want something that says something about you. But I would also, would say, stay away from anything that has to do with your children, your pets, you know, your hobby that, you know, you raise orchids in your.
I'm married. I'm in Kansas City, living with 2 lovely kids and 5 dogs.
No. What you want is everything that, again, you're building a brand, not even a personal brand. You want to keep it really professional because it's a professional platform. And then the last thing that
stuff goes on Instagram, not
exactly.
On
LinkedIn. This is a TikTok. This is not. That's not what this is. Also, the age of people on LinkedIn tends to be on the higher end, so like 35 and up, I would say. So, you know, these are serious people, and, you know, it's like we all get it. You have a personal life. Great. We just don't want to read about it here. Unless you're selling homes and there's a reason why you want to talk about the fact that you've lived in the same town, you know, because I've seen those kinds of profiles.
You've lived in there for 35 years, you know, every neighborhood and, you know, every property, stuff like that. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Then that's a great thing. And plus it makes you more approachable. And then the last thing is, I see this over and over again. You don't ask for anything. Like, I'm right here, right? Imagine I finally made it through all the potential stumbling blocks, and I get to your about page, and there's no call to action. It's like, what do you want me to do here? I'm not going to go look for you, right? So this is the other thing that people forget is, I've got you right here. Now's the time to ask for something. Book a call with me. You know, here's my email. Here's a link to my Facebook group. Here's the link to my podcast. Something. You need to have something happen there, because that also reinforces that you are a serious business. And it's the time to do it.
Yeah, one way to kind of summarize everything you said, because I use this for e-commerce when I'm optimizing these businesses. It's always about your site visitor. It's the person who's looking at your LinkedIn profile. It has to do with them. There's a reason why they clicked on your profile to come to your page.
Right.
Tell them this much about yourself, You know about marketing, great, or B2B marketing. That's it. Move on.
Move on.
Now talk about how can you bring value to them.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so the next sentence, give me 3 examples how you have brought value already to 3 examples, case studies, personal care, vitamins, cosmetics, whatever. 30% up, 75% up, 2x, whatever.
Yeah, data is always good for that. Yep.
Would you like to chat with me about your business? Contact me here, and then give your email address, a booking link, whatever. I think that's what a lot of people miss out on, because they think that the about section means that it's a
It's about
pedestal
them.
for them to write their biography, right?
Or to sell you. It's like, if I'm always very suspicious of people who are constantly trying to sell themselves. If you're an accomplished person and you're a thought leader, or you're really at the top of your game, you don't need to sell yourself. Your work speaks for itself. And then there's the other thing, which is you do want people to go back to your website at some point, and that's where more information could be. And there's also this whole idea, and we call it UX now, and the whole user experience, but it's really kind of the customer journey, right? And this is just one of the steps in the journey, but it's a really important one, because if I don't get who you are, what you do, and again, it's always, like you said, it's always about the other person, which is why getting clear on who is that person is so critical. And part of the whole LinkedIn rebrand process that I do is I really get clear on that person. And what's keeping them up at night, because it is, like you said, it's not about you. You are the person who is helping them transform something that they have been dealing with for a long time, and they're looking for a solution. And you need to present yourself as that solution, but not just as I fix this, but here's what happens. And it's almost like you should be hearing, like, choirs singing, or something that makes me feel like, wow, there's going to be something really big is going to happen. And even if it's something small to you, it may not be small to that person, which is why you need to do the market research. You need to understand that person, and stop thinking that you have to talk to everybody, because that gets people in trouble too.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to talk to everybody, you're talking to nobody.
You're
no
talking
one.
to no one.
Because you're
I
not.
say that all the
Then
time.
what you're doing is you're standing on top of a building and just yelling. That's
or
all
you're standing in the middle of Times Square and nobody sees you.
Yeah, unless you're a naked cowboy and you're singing, then.
But this is New York.
I'm from New York, so I know.
Oh, this is New York. Come on, nobody even sees that in New York. What are you talking about, Sabir? Yeah, I've seen that before. Saw that on the subway 2 weeks ago. Yeah, nothing.
No, that's usual. No, the naked cowboy is unique. Everything else you see in the subway is the norm. One other thing that always bothers me, right? When and I've actually been to my clients' location, like their headquarters, and these are B2B businesses or B2C businesses, right?
Yeah.
Their clinic, their headquarters, how they represent themselves is incredible. I'm blown away when I look at the physical space. But then I put their name in with .com to go to their site. Go like, what the hell is this? So many businesses, I don't know what they do. For some reason, all of these businesses, and this is not to poo-poo any specific industry. I've worked across every industry. There is no difference to me between the plumbing website, the real estate company website, the lawnmower website, and a cardiologist's website.
They're the worst. Doctors are the worst. Oh my God. Yeah. I've worked with doctors. I can tell you yeah.
So here's I think, I don't know why the miss is, because the thing is, in the past, you would have obsessed about working on that business card to make it look so amazing in 1970s, 80s, 90s. But now you have this incredible dynamic business card that tells a story, and you could put up videos and stuff. People miss it. What's your perspective on that?
Oh my, I'm so with you, Sabir. Oh my God. Because I remember, because I've been around long enough that I've seen the evolution of the website, and it started out, it was basically just take your brochure. Remember those step down brochures that were really
printed
big?
Catalogs, just slap it on.
Oh my God, those things, like somebody made a fortune on those things. They were horrible. Anyway, so they just basically took their brochure and they put it online, and that was the end of it, right? And that worked for a while because it was still new. But now we expect an
I'm sorry to
experience.
interrupt. Do you
Yeah.
remember that episode of The Office when the person has opened up just a Microsoft Word or WordPerfect on the
Yeah.
screen and says, "Oh, this is your website," and the person is writing stuff on it, thinking that that's their website.
Oh my God. That's funny. Yes. Well, again, we sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and I think that's why you need to hire professionals. I'm sorry, but you do. This is hard. I mean, I hired a professional for my website. It's really tough to do this yourself. But I think where people really go, they go kind of awry here is they think of their website in this really funny way. So the way I explain it is, so think of it as your house, right? It's your brand. It's your branded house. And, the URL is your address. Your the home page is actually your front door.
Curb appeal.
Curb appeal. And right. So back to our HDTV, right? Our secret vice,
Yeah.
So think about it. I mean, and I say this because I do a lot of public speaking on this topic. And so I remember saying to people, okay, how many of you put all of your bedroom furniture, your kitchen appliances, and all of your dishes outside your front door? Raise your hand, right? Nobody does that. Yet you get on somebody's homepage, because I see, where I see are the two extremes. Either it's just chock full of stuff that I'm never going to read, or it's just trying to sell me. And it's just all it's saying is buy, right? That's very transactional. But people don't think about their content that way. And yet you're right. If it's a business card, because we could see it, right? And we could experience it in a time continuum, if you will, right? What we're not seeing is all, and when people say this to me all the time, but well, nobody really uses our website. We just need to have one. It's like, really? Well, perhaps they're not using your website because there's nothing here for them to interact with, right? The problem is not the website as a medium. The problem is you're not using it in a way that's engaging people, because the goal of your homepage is to get people to click, because the more they click, the more they're engaging. The more they are engaging, the more interested they are. And at every step of the way, there has to be a way that you don't make them go find you, right? There's always the contact information or some way for them to kind of stay in touch, either download this or, book time with me here, or, and it's almost like we had to relearn how to engage with people in the digital space, because we knew how to do it in real life, in IRL. We know how to do it when brick and mortar, right? But now what we're missing is the fact that, first of all, this is a 24/7, right? This thing is on all the time. And so you have no idea how people are going to interact. So you don't want people to create the narrative for you. You want to give them enough information that really what they want to do is they want to find out more about you and they want to contact you. There has to be like, what's the purpose? The purpose is not to tell people how great you are. The purpose is to show what you do, what people get. Testimonials are great, especially if you've worked with companies I've heard of. Instead of telling me about them, just, have a banner that shows like all these logos. It's like, oh my God, you've worked with CBS and, NPR, whatever, depending on your business. Those speak volumes, and we don't think about that, right? So we hide all this stuff, and it's kind of like everywhere and nowhere. And it's also just the whole idea of kind of what is it you want people to do, and how do you take them from the time they enter your website to hopefully the time they either pick up the phone or book a call with you. I don't know. Does anybody call anybody anymore? I think they just book calls, right?
They just book calls, or unless you're in a business where you have to make an appointment to see like a doctor,
right. That's
like
different. But most of us, we book time on somebody's calendar, and then we talk to them, right?
Yeah. No, I think that when it comes to some of the businesses, I don't know, like the consumer journey. If you think about it, nowadays people, thanks to the pandemic, and we will talk about the pandemic right soon. Thanks to the pandemic, most of the world, almost all of the world, knows about QR codes. Number one, they didn't know what QR codes were. Number two, they know how to order stuff online and it shows up at their door, right? They didn't know how to do that. Most of the world didn't know that. I was expecting it in 2035. It got compressed. Now we got it like 15 years early, right? Given that, the journey of that consumer or even that business. Oh, let me Google them. When they Google you and they show up to your site, I hope that you have a website, because some businesses still don't have a website. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
Number two, when they show up to your website, I don't get anything from it. I might consider that you don't do it. What you might be providing 50 different types of services. You did not list any one of them. You just put your photo up and you said you are a, I don't know, plumber, chiropractor, whatever. That's it.
Right.
But you didn't really tell me what kind of a chiropractor do you use, given, do you work on seniors? Do you work on dogs? Do you work on young people? Do you work on pregnant women? You never told me any of those things,
Right.
So when you are not doing it, in fact, you are being detrimental to your own business. That journey has changed. It's no longer 9x yellow pages that people are flipping through 600 pages to find your nice ad banner. That yellow pages has turned into Google. That's
right.
Google.
That's
And if
right.
you and your website is the gigantic storytelling board, the billboard that your town had, that's what you need to do to tell your story. If you don't do that, you're missing it, right? And then if you have
Absolutely.
it, don't give it to your nephew or niece to build that
Oh,
site.
please. Oh, yeah. My nephew, my neighbor's kid, my granddaughter, I've heard it all. I've heard, and they're always like, oh yeah, and they're handling my social media. Really? Oh, good. I'm so happy to hear that, right? So, that you have some kid who is the voice of your brand on social media where billions of people go every day, right? It's
To represent you.
to represent you. See, this is I think where the big gap is between where we were when we could see it, touch it, like we were in it, right? And we met with people face to face. And you're right, the pandemic has completely upended everything anyway. And I do believe you're right. It has accelerated the speed of technology at a rate that we couldn't even imagined. And now, just you need to assume, like, first of all, most under 35 are not even on desktops. They're on their phone. They're not even on iPads. They're just on their phones all the time, 24/7. I forget the numbers, but I have 2 Gen Zers, so I know a little bit about that. And I will say that the big issue there is we don't really take the time to figure out how do we go from someone visiting on my website or checking me out on LinkedIn to actually scheduling time with me and then becoming a customer. Like, what does that look like? And if we took the time to really understand it, then we would know that there are all these kind of touch points that we are missing. So when you're on the homepage, that's a place not to tell you everything. And please stop talking about like your new hire and how great your team is. We don't care about that. That is not what we want to see here. The only thing I should be learning on your homepage there's 2 things. Why am I here and why should I care? That's it. So the less you say, the more focused you are on kind of and again, think about one person. What is that one person? Right? This is why you do personas and empathy maps. And, you really want to learn who is that person, because then, if I land on there and I'm, we did this whole project for an acupuncturist actually in New York. I can't remember her name now. Anyway, and it was like a game changer to really get her to sort of see, well, yeah, okay, acupuncture works for everybody, for everything. Okay, but really, what is your niche? And then the moment she got much more targeted, all of a sudden, that was also the work that was coming in, and she became much more successful. And that's something I want to, because there's always the connection with, it's not just about getting people to come. It's also actually about making money, because if you're not making money, it's a hobby. It's not a business.
Yep, totally. Now, you have dropped so much wisdom on the show, Orly, and I think we had a great time. What is your number one $100,000 expert insight into branding your startup? Well, from your view, or you wrote a book and you shared so many examples so far. What is your number one?
That's such a good question. I have so many of them, but if I had to pick one, it's figure out who you are and leave out everything that doesn't fit. And I know that's going to hurt. It's going to feel weird. It's going to feel like, you're kind of choosing which child you love better, kind of thing. But really, the clearer you can be, the easier it will be to figure out who needs it. And then, just get rid of all the fluff. Just get rid of the fluff and just really focus in on one, even if it's, one thing, me talking about cutting through the noise and standing out. It's a noisy world. I've been saying that for 20 years, but I will tell you that you want to be associated with something like that because it helps people remember you. And that's kind of where we are now. If people don't remember you, they don't look for you, they won't find you, they won't buy you, and they certainly won't refer you.
Well said. Thank you, Orly, for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Sabir. This has been so much fun, and it really felt more like just a fun conversation. So thank you for that.
And thank you, audience, for tuning in live. And if you are catching it on a recording, thank you also. And we will take a break for Thanksgiving next week. But then, other than that, we come back. We have 4 more guests left for this year, as amazing as Orly. So definitely tune in.
Thank you.